So welcome to 2026 and welcome to the first edition of The Point of View here on Channel 1 Television. This is the show that get the right guests, ask them relevant questions on the big issues. Tonight we're looking at Ghana's economy a year. Indeed, today the 5th of January is just 2 days before a complete year of President Mahama being in office. We're analyzing his first year of economic reset, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll do it from three angles. We'll look at the monetary issues, we'll look at the fiscal issues, we'll also look at some energy sector challenges. I have a three-man panel to delve into the subject. Stay with us.
What does it take to be Ghana's most useful technology company? Is it the fact that we've been connecting businesses to their customers for over 20 years? Or that we power more than 12% of all electronic transactions in Ghana? Maybe it's that we are everywhere, from Accra to Ho, Kumasi to Tadi, Cape Coast to Tamale. Or is it that we safely process more transactions than any indigenous tech company here in Ghana? Or we deliver faster, we transfer safer, or we make businesses and life just a little easier? But what truly makes us Ghana's most useful technology company, it isn't the speed or the numbers. It's the people we connect, the dreams we keep moving, the communities we bring closer every single day. You prove every day what usefulness really looks like. We give you the tools, you provide the proof. Haptel, useful every day.
So tonight we're asking, how well is the economic reset going? We have three perspectives to look at. Obviously, the monetary side of things, looking at things like inflation, the exchange rate, and of course, the gold board has also come under big discussion because of the performance of gold on international markets, the recalibration of the gold board and its constitution. We'll also look at some fiscal issues, and then if we have time, we'll also analyze the energy sector. My guests are Bright Simmons, who is the Honorary Vice President of Imani. He's also the founder and the CEO of M-Pedigree. Bright, it's always good to have you. Good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
You are here on your policy hat.
I'm wearing my policy hat.
You are here on the Imani platform. Dr. Theo Acheampong is an energy economist, among other things. These days, he works for the Ministry of Finance as a technical advisor. Doc, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening. Pleasure to see you and Happy New Year. And it's good to see Manche, Bright as well.
Amazing. And of course, Senyo Hosi will join us shortly as the program proceeds. I think I'll start with you, right? This is the first time I've hosted you since you changed your role from an independent policy analyst to now advising a government. What does your job mean? And I just want to understand how it works. Are you sort of free to say anything you want? Or because you advise the government, you sort of speak for the government? Let's just get that out of the way, Theo.
Yes, thank you. And it's a good question you've asked. So you can say things as they are. It's as simple as that. The fact of the matter is that we speak on the basis of the available evidence, whether you are in government or outside of government. Of course, people may reach different conclusions based on where they are coming from, and which is understandable in the policy discourse. But in terms of the fundamental data and then the analytical input that goes into it, and the fact that when you are in government, you are now having to make multiple decisions. So it's some sort of what you call a multi-objective optimization problem, just to make it a little bit more technical. So there are always trade-offs that have to be made. And those trade-offs have to be weighed in terms of the policy cost and then the potential benefit. So a lot of the time, you're doing cost-benefit analysis, you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the data, and then you're offering the best advice based on the circumstances at the time to the bosses, at the top. So my role for the last few weeks has largely been working around some or supporting the budget processes, especially when it comes to the setup of the Independent Fiscal Council. And this is one of the key anchors when it comes to our exit from the IMF program, being able to have some sort of ombudsman in there to check the compliance to the two new fiscal rules that we've set up, so that the debt to GDP should not be any more than 45% by 2035. And then the primary balance, you always have to run a surplus of 1.5% of GDP. You need such institutions in place to be able to ensure that they are able to sort of put the government and ensure that the government is complying with the rules. It's that largely been a part of my work, in addition to all manner of other things that come in.
Wonderful. So let me give you a framework for the discussion. I think we have to do 3 rounds of discussion. Round 1 will look at just issues which usually the central bank would be more responsible for. So things around the exchange rate, which for some reason has become almost the leading indicator of economic performance. I'm not sure if you all agree, but at least for the past, 10 years, it's become very, very topical in our public discourse. Baumia famously said, if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate to expose, we'll discuss that. Inflation is also very critical, and we know that the central bank has responsibility for that. Inevitably, in discussing the exchange rate and the currency stability, we would have to talk about the gold reserve program and the gold board. So that's going to come up in the first round. The second round, I call the financing round, because I think the everlasting question for the government is how to finance our development. And if you look at what happened in 2022 and the whole kicking us out of the international capital markets, it's really a question of getting good money to do good things. And it's quite clear that Eurobonds may not be enough, or not be lucrative, or economical. So where is government going to get the money from? Will there be enough taxes? Is government being too stingy with spending? Is the stability coming at a growth cost? We'll look at some of those things. And then later on, I think the energy sector is a major issue, because people like even Bright has written around every 3-4 years we get a shock. And I think in Mahama's first term, his shock was an energy shock. And the energy sector has been a very, very serious dent on any government. So I think it would be important to talk about those 3. If we have time, we could talk about all other things. So let's start with the monetary side. Bright, do you agree that the exchange rate has become almost the lead indicator of economic performance, for good or bad reason? That in Ghana, if a government is to be seen to be managing the economy well, the exchange rate needs to behave a certain way for people to say they've done well preliminarily?
For 2 reasons. I mean, one is visibility and the other is simplicity, right?
Okay.
So when the exchange rate starts to misbehave, it's very easy to put a single number there. Today is 15 to $1, tomorrow is 12 to $1. So everybody grasps. And my theory of how political societies, politics work is that you have policy, which is, often the interest of very small numbers of citizens.
Yeah.
And then you have politics, which everybody connects to. Anything that can mobilize large numbers of people and attract the attention of large numbers of people is immediately political.
All right.
It doesn't matter if it's a policy matter. So long as large numbers of people can, be attuned to the dynamics of that particular thing, then that thing becomes political. So exchange rates have become political because the average Ghanaian, which then, numbers in the tens of millions, 20 million Ghanaians, will be of reasonable adulthood, can appreciate the exchange rate. That's why it's such a political thing. The second one is simplicity. There are other things like inflation that are also quite visible, but it's hard to understand.
And even relate to.
Relate to, because of the baskets and the way it works. Everybody has his own inflation. People don't realize that your personal inflation depends on what you buy. So because of that, there is a distinction between the general headline inflation and many other inflation numbers, including regional inflation numbers, the city you live in, the class you belong to, the kind of things you prefer, etc. So that creates complexity around inflation. And then you can think of other macroeconomic variables which are even harder to appreciate. Think of the primary balance that you talk about. I mean, when do you even start trying to explain that?
Who even cares?
Who cares about the primary balance? Think of monetary financing. Setting a monetary financing target for the central bank not to finance the bank from its balance sheet. Think of quantitative easing and all of those. They're just difficult to get ordinary people to connect with. So my simple answer is that simplicity and visibility are the reasons why the exchange rate has become so important.
But in our public discourse, are we focusing on the right issue around exchange rate? So yes, simplicity and importance and politics. But are we interpreting the exchange rate correctly in using it to assess economic performance?
Yes, because the exchange rate is connected to other parameters in ways that makes it very hard to game. One is that obviously because it's a market rate, you can actually walk into the market and ask for a price. It means therefore that attempts to game it is a bit harder. You don't have a lot of methodological corners to hide if you want to game the exchange rate. So that means therefore that if you are using this as a benchmark or an indicator for other factors, it's one of the quickest ones to use. The second area that I find interesting about it is, because it's about a measure of competitiveness. The exchange rate is really a measure of the competition between your economy and the other countries whose currency you are comparing your currency with. So if it's the USD, obviously that competitive dynamic means that there's an external element, which also means not everything is within your control in a way. So when Dr. Baumia used to say that the exchange rate will expose you, his feeling was that it's harder to game. So while it's not everything, usually a pathological exchange rate, an exchange rate that's going crazy,
it's a clear indication.
It's a clear indication there's a fever going on. Sorry, the way that the fever is a clear indication that there's some underlying problem. The exchange rate is like a fever. It's very difficult to have a exchange rate going all over the place if there isn't an underlying pathology.
So your exchange rate is not everything, but it's one of the most important things.
Yes, because
obviously
it gives you a signal.
The best test of a certain level of economic stability.
It's a diagnostic signal. Today I'm going to use a lot of medical analogies.
So you can use a bad exchange rate or an unstable exchange rate to sort of assess economic management.
Yes, because you have an external benchmark, right? You have the other country whose currency this you are comparing with. And their inflation, your inflation, their interest rate, your interest rate. So when you look at what we call the REER, those dynamics that allows us to look for fundamental measurements. We are always trying to compare our dynamics with the other dynamics, but that is a very interesting, it's not a randomized quality of evidence, but it's still very close to something that is not easy to game because you have the external benchmark.
So when we take exchange rate and we look at Mahama, most people say when it came, the cedi to the dollar was X, and now it is X minus this. Therefore, he has done well. So is that the way to interpret it?
So in my view, that's where the danger lies. Because my view is that it's about the long-term stability of the exchange rate. The ability to hold your exchange rate relatively stable.
Good.
In comparison with your major trading partners. Exchange rate is not some blanket number. It's
not a relative figure
to some other country. That's why the pound exchange rate is not the same as the dollar exchange rate. So that's important. The second one is that it's very trade-driven. And trade-driven dynamics mean, therefore, that there are countries that try to keep the exchange rate low, like China for many years. In fact, one of the biggest problems between the Chinese and Americans was that Americans used to accuse the Chinese of undervaluing their currency.
So their exports were more competitive.
Exactly. So Japan was also accused for many years of gaming the yen, which means, therefore, that if the trade channel is important to you, then the exchange rate is not a simple number and just keep it strong.
There are strategic reasons for keeping it at a certain place.
Yeah, but what is important is that it shouldn't fluctuate wildly.
So stability is the most important thing.
Stability is the most important thing, not necessarily appreciation.
And stability over what period? How do you measure stability?
That's hard. But generally, it should be in sync with the business cycle, because mostly it's about the private sector. So if I am a business person, I have a farm or whatever, the business cycle for me, whether it's a 3-year business cycle, it can be complicated. But let's just keep it simple. My decision around, buying inputs, making the product, selling it, getting it back, whatever that cycle might be, and change of sentiment, or whatever that cycle, it's good that my planning sequence aligns with an exchange rate that is relatively stable. Because otherwise, rather than thinking about the actual inputs, the real inputs, I'm thinking about some other input that's not really part of my analysis. I don't control, it's an extraneous factor, right? I have my business model. I go and buy inputs, I add value, I sell. I have a margin. All of these things are very related to my competitiveness as a firm within an economy. Then all of a sudden, there's some other factor that says that even though I've done everything right and I'm supposed to have 20% margin, because of movement of the exchange rate, when I look at it, I don't have 20% margin again. So that complexity, it doesn't work for businesses. Businesses need
stability, predictability.
But also within their own, what is within their control. The extraneous factors shouldn't change too much. So if exchange rate, which I can't control, radically changes, if inflation radically changes, if exchange rate radically changes, then it doesn't matter what I do as an entrepreneur, as a business manager, as a corporate leader, everything goes awry.
So you're saying stability is critical.
It's critical
for business planning, for whatever.
Yeah, because then
more important than even the number.
Absolutely, because what it then does is that it makes my decision making as a corporate leader or as an entrepreneur the dominant factor.
Fair enough.
The things are within my control. My ability to add value, my ability to see a product market fit, an opportunity in the marketplace, those kinds of things. So my sense is that if it's fluctuating too wildly, it creates more problems in some ways than if it was depreciating but slowly and steadily.
Wonderful.
And also, you always need some minor deflation. Inflation. When you are overly stagnant, it's usually not very good for growth. So those of you who follow the Francophone countries will know that the more advanced Francophone countries, they've had very stable inflation for a very long time. But in some ways, that has also not helped growth too much. Because usually the inflation is an adjustment because factors in the economy are changing and the monetary volume is trying to keep pace. So my thinking is that you need some mild inflation usually. And when you are stagnant or worst case scenario deflating, like we saw in Japan in some Asia, it's usually not a very good sign.
So far we've learned a couple of things, that stability is more important than even the figure. But of course, having a weak exchange rate does affect certain aspects of your economy. So for example, if you're an importer, the weaker your exchange rate, the more difficult it is. So before I come to Theo for his verdict, I had wanted a verdict from you on the 1 year of exchange rate management. Are you able to say a government has done well in a year, or it's too short? Because you are looking at stability. Do you prefer a longer term?
I think in that case, it's easy for us because we have the IMF program as a scaffolding. You know, there are quantitative performance criteria, there are continuous performance criteria, there are structural benchmarks. These are all crazy, stupid English to say that they are monitoring things like a dial. So you think of it like you are flying a plane. You see all those instrument gauges. All of them are balancing out altitude, pressure, all this. So that is how it is. The program provides us with a framework. And so it makes something that will ordinarily be difficult to discuss because so many variables easier. So when we go to the program and we look at performance of the program, you realize that exchange rate is actually not one of them, which tells you something interesting. Because in some ways, the exchange rate is an extraneous variable in some ways. If you
so they are looking at the fiscal deficit, they are looking at
the primary deficit like you talked about, you're looking at debt, they are looking at stopping collateralization, which people have not noticed. But right now, the government is actually barred from issuing guarantees, sovereign guarantees. I mean, I don't know what the exemption criteria is, that one Dr. Acheampong can tell us. But as a standard, we are not allowed to issue sovereign guarantees. There are all of these things that are preventing us from accumulating debt too quickly. There are these things that are preventing us from living beyond our means, which is what we call the primary balance. So basically, the things that you control within the specific financing cycle, let's say the 1 year financial year, those things are those that typically fall within the primary
But
balance.
don't forget that the IMF program, they have their scaffolding, as you call it, because of specific things they want to achieve with the economy. As against, for example, if you ask an ordinary businessman what he wants to see in an economy, sometimes they may not always be the same. Right?
In fact, even within the program, you have the medium term and you have the acute stabilization measures.
Fair enough.
So the acute stabilization measures is like a patient. Let's say a patient with morbidities. So you have
very medical
hypertension, you have diabetes, you have cardiovascular disease, all of it together. In those circumstances, when you get a stressor, like get an infection or something like that, you can easily be, prone to multiple organ failure. So the first thing is to stabilize you, vasopressors, all those things in the world.
Can we say that in the first 1 year,
the stabilization has worked?
It has worked.
The stabilization has not only worked. In some instances, we have outperformed the expectation on inflation. it's moved faster than we had thought.
Good.
The primary balance, which, because it's a balance of payment program, is the reason why the IMF it came into being. Their main initial goal was balance of payment. And why? Because they were concerned about the global economic environment. So there's systemic issues in the global economy. So ensuring that if a country's balance of payments is not completely out of kilter. So they start off with those things, living within your means, being able to relate with other economies within the global economic system and the rest. So those matters where we are more or less we are not expecting the rest of the world to fund us.
I see.
You see what I mean? So, and part of that has been forced on us by us being shut out from the international capital markets.
All right, let me take Theo's comment, but let me say Senyo Hosi is here. Senyo, thanks for joining us as well.
Pleasure.
Senyo also wears many hats, One Ghana movement, but he's wearing one hat today. But on the show, he also is an economic policy analyst. He wrote an interesting op-ed.
Before you go, I should very quickly say though that even though the acute stabilization has worked, there are some concerns that we may not be on the right path toward the structural reform.
Because of the way the stabilization has been achieved.
Not necessarily, but there are two things, and they are not,
I'll let you deal with that. The question I wanted to ask Theo Acheampong was, exchange rate as a number or stability is not even in the benchmarks necessarily, as Bright says. Yet, this government appears, let me borrow the words of Professor Bockman, obsessed with the exchange rate. He said that in an interview, I think, a month and a half ago. Why is the government obsessed with the exchange rate, even though it's not necessarily even part of the IMF program benchmarks? Dr. Acheampong.
Okay, so quick one. I am just downloading the IMF program benchmarks, and I would speak authoritatively to the issue of whether the exchange rate is part of the call it the benchmarks or the indicators and other structural measures that we're looking at under the program. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But however you slice and dice it, and it's you asked a very important question to Bright in terms of his overall assessment of the economy, and then particularly the exchange rate. The exchange rate, if not the single biggest indicator, right, of how well you're managing the economy. There are other indicators. So in my line of work and then the things that you do, you could track as much as 15 plus indicators across 4 dimensions. So you could look at the real economy side, the GDP, the economic activity index, the business confidence index. You could look at the prices and the monetary side. And this is where your exchange rate comes in, your inflation comes in, the lending rates, policy rate comes in. Number 3, you could look at the external side. And this is where your reserves, your trade balance, your current account, and all these other big English that we use comes in. And then number 4, you can look at the fiscal and then the debt side on the deficit, the balance, and then the overall right debt levels. And in all of these things, the one thing that connects them, right, you could argue strongly in terms of the channels of impact, whether it's on the trade side or I call it the broader macro variables, is the exchange rate. So to the extent that you are now able to see an uptick in economic activity, if you look at the business confidence index, you look at some of the other indicators that the Bank of Ghana and other people track, you are seeing year on year an improvement in activity, to the extent that if you look at the inflation numbers, it's come down significantly from, I think last end year was around 23 or 24%, and now we're around 6 or so percent within the 2% symmetrical band. If you look at the fact that as we speak currently, the policy rate is coming further down, and there's even scope for the central bank to do further rounds of cuts, right? And the fact that, again, if you look at the reserve numbers, they are up year on year, your trade balances are positive, and even your debt numbers have come down from around 62 to about 47, 48% of GDP. All of this tell one very important signal. And the important signal is that the relative stability that we have seen and the fact that the country or the economy has turned around is being pushed, not just in terms of big numbers that we're discussing, but ordinary Ghanaians, right, are feeling it. And they're also feeling it when it comes to, right, the exchange rate dimension. So if you were to ask me, has 2025 been a good year for Ghanaians? Absolutely, it has been. Will 2026 be even better? I think so. If you look at what the government has put in place in terms of some of the measures that are contained within the budget and some of the things that are being done when we leave the IMF program by the middle of the year. So the point fundamentally is that, yes, the exchange rate is quite important in terms of the signal on the competitive side, which Bright talks about. And if you look at the real effective exchange rate, for Ghana, again, these numbers are compiled by the central bank. You see an improvement on that side. And then the key thing which many people are worried about and concerned about is, can we see relative stability? It is not good for any business. It is not good for households. If today your exchange rate is 15, and then tomorrow it's coming down to 10, and then the next day it goes back up to 15. That causes a lot of chaos when it comes to planning. So really what then becomes important is how you manage that exchange rate within a certain band. And that is what most other economies do, whether it is China or whether it is, the UK or US, regardless of the regime type that they are playing, whether it's floating or peg, there's always going to be a band within which you use that to conduct both your fiscal policy and your monetary policy. And it comes down also to the point of, what do you want to do across the business cycle? The business cycle is normally 3 to 4 years, right? And it's, in our case, often even tied to the political cycle as well. All right. Really, a lot of the effort that is being done now and a lot of the work that is being pushed in, especially on the external side, and we'll come to the good discussion in a moment, is really to send enough confidence to the market that the gains that we have made in 2025 on the macro front, especially the exchange rate, can and will be sustained going into 2026 and beyond.
So fair enough. My understanding of whether the exchange rate is benchmark or not, I think the IMF will talk about fiscal discipline, monetary policies to control inflation, reforms in energy banking, the rest of it. Yes, and then they basically want you to...
I'm not saying that they don't care about it.
So they want you to implement policies that will make the exchange rate stable, but they don't give you a number.
No,
so it's not what I'm saying. It's not a specific number.
The channel is through the net international reserves.
Yes.
The reason why you can discern that they care about it, because they have a net international reserves benchmark, and we all know the reserves are very linked to the stability of your currency, because usually your balance of payments crisis will hit on.
So you're saying it's not explicit.
So it's not explicit because usually you don't go around just with a dart trying to target the exchange rate. You do other things, and the exchange rate is like a fever, or the absence of a fever.
Let me take your... I think you became prominent, in my view, in media many years ago at the seaboard, because at the time, you people were shouting about FX losses all the time. This was Setekpe's time. I remember you used to shout and say, the Chamber of Bulk Distributors, there has to be some work done to pay you guys back, because you bring in finished product at a certain price with a certain dollar rate, and by the time you finish selling, the dollar has changed.
That's not the reason.
No, I'm coming. That's my understanding.
Yeah,
so these days, the exchange rate has become a very important figure. But I'm saying that part of its importance was when FX losses became a big part of our business discourse in 2014, 2013, 2015-ish. You may deny that, but
that's true.
That's the truth.
That's true.
Yes.
When you talk
so,
about
but
it
the question to you actually is that
FX loss came, the term FX loss became quite popular.
Under your time?
Under my time.
Do you think this government is obsessed with exchange rate stability?
I think it's one of the things they will take credit for, and they've worked towards it, so it is fair. But let's get it very clear. Exchange rates inflation, GDP growth are all macroeconomic outputs in economic planning. If you take the IMS financial policy programming framework, which is used for national budgeting in most countries, it's not an input, it is an output. All right, so you have various assumptions that go in there, like your primary surplus and all that. And you end up coming out with things like exchange rates, things like inflation. That's how our budget is done. Ghana's budget is not done with any wild juju framework from somewhere. No, there's a financial model that's in there. It's called the financial policy programming or something of that. So sometimes we call it the FCPP, but the FPP that does that. I'll walk you through some of the inputs that you look at. You look at the world GDP growth. You look at commodity prices and how you estimate them. You look at global interest rates. Exchange rate assumptions are there. You have previous year's GDP, inflation starting point. You have fiscal deficit at the start. Debt stock and interest payments, policy assumptions. Under that, you have your planned tax measures, expenditure ceilings, monetary policy stance, your exchange rate regime, whether it's pegged, like he rightly said, or it's floating. And then you have structural assumptions. Under that, you have productivity growth, population growth, and sectorial output trends. From that, you get a set of output that comes in.
Including the exchange rate.
And you have
so I get all this. My question is, you know, are we not making too much of it because of the earlier point around its simplicity and the politicization of it? Because if you have a whole basket of things you've listed in analyzing an economy, it seems as if in Ghana, the exchange rate has become that measure. And my question to you, the three of you, is there not a danger in overemphasizing just one indicator?
I don't think that there's an overemphasizing of that indicator. We're also looking at inflation. We are looking at GDP growth projections. We are beating what's been said. Inflation forecast. We are doing what's been said. Our fiscal deficit part, I think our debt, sustainability is quite clear. We are seeing primary balances are way ahead of what was projected under the IMF program. Our balance of payment forecast, again, we are beating that. Reserves accumulation, we have way beating that. Revenue and expenditure projections, okay, we had a revenue projection, we have an expenditure projection. All those go back to feed into our primary balance. We
underspent on the expenditure side.
We have done that.
And underperformed the revenue.
Side.
Yes.
Because we didn't want to spoil the deficit thing.
So you look at both.
So you disagree with those who say we are overemphasizing the exchange rate?
I don't think it's just because it's the easier one to talk about.
Fair enough.
Like, you know, we the professional pocket lawyers, they are also pocket economists. My mother will only understand exchange rate. She will understand the price of things at the market. So that's a conversation you can easily have because we are very import dependent.
Yeah, because we are import dependent.
Exactly.
There's a lot of noise when the currency depreciates.
The translational effect is instant and very visible. When we talk about inflation, how many people will just easily see inflation?
He explained that everybody has a different inflation, but the exchange rate is easy to understand.
Exactly.
So it has gained its importance.
It has not just got popularity. But as far as economic speak and economic appreciation, evaluation of this engagement is concerned,
fair enough.
It is not.
All right.
In fact, as a matter of in the list here, exchange rate assumptions are part of the inputs.
All right.
Yeah.
All of us agree on this. I know we'll be able to point. I think the next big question on exchange rate is what has led to the good performance. I think that's where really the cookie crumbles. Is it just backing it with so it basically, is it artificial stability? Is it artificial propping? Or is the current rate natural? I think that's the thing people want to understand. I'll take a break and I'll come and deal with that. Then I'll move to my other issues. Point of view tonight is trying to understand how to analyze 1 year of the Mahama economic reset. Exchange rate has taken almost half an hour. So even on this show, exchange rate is competing with other indicators. Clearly, exchange rate is a big guy. We'll be back. My guest bride, Senyo Hosi, and Dr. Theo Acheampong. Stay with us.
matter where we wander, Africa always calls us home. And here in Ghana, Stanbic Corporate and Investment Banking, together with clients like Gensa Energy and Goldfields, is driving sustainable growth.
The transition from fossil fuel to cleaner energy is quite imperative for the growth of a continent that we call home.
We want to contribute to delivering affordable gas for industrialization in Africa.
Stanbic is a bank that is focused on impacting lives, and Gensa has the same vision and mission.
Having a reliable source of power has helped our business and our operations in a significant way.
At Stanbic Bank, we bring businesses together, empower communities, and invest in the next generation. Stanbic Corporate and Investment Banking, driving growth, creating impact.
Welcome back. So tonight, my panel agrees that the government has done well in exchange rate management. Even with stability, you can say so. I think the big question for this last aspect of the exchange rate discussion is, what has been the real reason for the relative stability of the exchange rate and the, I want to say, good performance from a perspective of its appreciation? Because for the importers, the depreciation was a major issue. So I'm picking my words carefully. I wanted to do this very quickly. So Bright, in your view, what has been the because in economics we're taught that the exchange rate is the relative value of two countries' economies.
Yes.
So if your exchange rate is
through the trade channel.
Yes. So
it's not just
that's
standard.
the basic thing we're taught. So what do you think is the most important reasons why the currency has stabilized relatively and has also appreciated quite well? Indeed, Bloomberg put out a chart on 30th December, and they show that this is the first year end since 1994 that the cedi has appreciated against the dollar year end. All right? The chart shows negative all the way through from 94 till 2025. So clearly something good has happened. I think the question viewers want to know is, what is the reason?
Let me make some very few quick points before I answer the question. One is that this is the first time we are seeing significant improvement in macroeconomic indicators under constraint. What does that mean? It means that if you look at previous appreciation cycles, including for inflation as well, 2009, 2010, 2016, 2017, 2018, all of those periods, they were happening under improved optimism. Things were on the upswing. So this is the first time we are coming out of a crisis and we are under massive constraint because of the IMF program. And yes, we appear to be doing well. So that's interesting. The second thing is that you mentioned import dependence, and I wanted to clarify a little bit. So often when we think of import dependence, our mind immediately goes to goods. But there are countries like the US, which are very import dependent on goods. But they have other services which cover. So you sit here and you watch Netflix. You sit here and you buy use American apps, Facebook and things like that. All of that generates income in different ways, which goes back to the country to cover. So it's not only the goods channel you should think about. That's why today in Ghana we have a massive goods surplus if you actually look at the numbers on the trade side. But the current accounts are not looking that spectacular. So it's very important that we always don't exaggerate the goods channel. I'm not saying the goods channel is not important, it's very important, but we tend to over-exaggerate it when we think about import dependence and things like that. Services are also very important, as well as other.
But when you add services,
flows.
are we still not import dependent?
Yes, we may, yeah. But for now, we are not. Because I think for now, overall, the current account is positive.
Fair enough.
The last point I wanted to make in that respect, going back there, is around the stabilization point. Is I just recently did some study, a small study. I took 30 years of Unilever data.
Yes, I read
all
that.
the key data points.
Yeah.
And it turns out that even though the same as Unilever is doing very well, if you adjust for currency, Unilever has actually been growing at minus 1.7% every year for the last 30 years. You know, revenue has literally it's not literally 1/3 what it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and that is the effect of stabilization. You know that in between that period, there have been moments of massive appreciation. It doesn't change the dynamic, because what you need is long-term stability. So having made those points, I'll go straight now to answer your question around the relative contribution of the different factors.
Yeah.
There is something we call the Global Exchange Rate Assessment Framework that the US Treasury uses. Now, you could attempt to answer the question that you were asking, doing something like multivariate regressions, CVM. There are so many models you can try and use where you take a lot of panel data, you take multiple data streams for different indicators, inflation, all of these things. And then you link them back to policy in some fashion and say, how do you go about it? I think that's noisy. It gets too complicated. Some very good economists, like our good brother on Zoom, may attempt it at some point. But there are simpler ways, qualitative ways, where you start with the policies themselves and try and disagree. So we created a kind of quasi...
When you say we, who?
Imani.
Okay.
A quasi giraffe model that allows us to assign and to do some attribution. Starting with the policies themselves. So essentially, instead of trying to look at the different data streams and then later on impute the policies, you look at the policy and say historically, when you look at Ghana and you look at performance on policy in the context of an IMF program, because that the good thing about the IMF program is that they rate it. They say you didn't meet this benchmark, you met this benchmark, you didn't meet this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. So it allows us to go back, and we've done it 17 times, right? So it allows you to go back a number of cycles and look at the different performance as reported by the surveillance measure. And then based on that, you kind of look at the ones that when you perform well over time, they kind of make a contribution. And usually, the areas around central bank not financing the government, issues around primary surplus, which typically is a fiscal consolidation outcome. I mean, people can disagree, but generally, by which we simply mean that when the government is not spending very much, and then how we accumulate payables, all of those dynamics versus the issues there around intervention, which is the central bank going to the market and selling one foreign currency to try and manage expectations and do other things. Actually, sometimes also structural demand. People actually want the dollar, like importers.
So when you did all
fuel.
that, what did when you put that in a machine, what did the
what
machine
is concluded was that 55% was due to the key IMF programs and the debt restructuring that happened. So more than half is due to these things that we are talking
So
about.
the other indicators, managing those things well.
No, they are not indicators. These are literally activities that the government has to manage properly. So for instance...
So in that sense, the exchange becomes a consequence.
Exactly.
A consequence.
And then the intervention channel, so basically the Bank of Ghana going to the market, selling dollar or pounds or whatever, the issue is dollars that they sell. And trying to ensure that three things happen. One, some structural demands are met. So people that want to import fuel and things like that. Two, trying to affect sentiment. And three, price discovery, trying to get a sense of what people think in the economy about the currency. When it goes into market and does those things, it also has an effect.
What percentage do you attribute to that?
So I'm coming on. So we have a managed float system. My feeling is that we are moving closer to a managed peg system. Because as you pointed out, the president himself has set some kind of band. And that is influencing the central bank. So in that context, that intervention channel, you have to decide how much of that is gold board or other factors. Because gold board is very popular. So we look at that particular channel. And then what we discovered in our view is that the gold board contributions in terms of the actual amount of money that it makes available, in terms of the gold rally, the price, if you unpack those and you tease it out, you get over 30-something% being the other factors rather than the gold board factor. And that's what became controversial. So our belief is that the gold board contribution, and that is primarily the innovation of gold board, which is to centralize the gold dollars and divert more to the Bank of Ghana than other participants in the financial system. When you take that specific dynamic and say, okay, how much has it helped with intervention? And then you isolate intervention alone, you get about 10% or less for the gold board piece. But that's our analysis.
I see. But if we, in common English, you're saying the other things the IMF program enjoined us to do
take more than half.
And then the 45% or so left, the intervention by the BOG accounts for that, of which the gold board is about a tenth of that. That's
no,
what you're
a gold board is about a third of that.
A third of that. Yeah. But we agree that there's been an accumulation of gold reserves by the central bank.
Yes, we've moved from, I think, 8.9 billion to about 13 billion.
And this is both volumes. This is volumes and value of gold.
Oh, the item of gold reserves alone. So people make that mistake. Yes. There's general reserves and they have gold reserves. Gold reserves, we've moved from about 31 to 34 tons. So we haven't done much there. But in terms of general reserves, the money that is there in different forms, we've moved from about 8.9 billion end of 2024 to about 13 point something billion today.
Good. Let me take Theo's analysis of what has been the main driver of the stabilization and relative appreciation. He says when he does his thing, a lot of it is the IMF program requirements, which as a consequence, the currency gets stable. And then the intervention, of which about a third is gold board specific. All right. So you can say a third of 45% is probably around 18% or no.
There are other numbers, but don't worry.
No worry.
Yeah,
Theo, what does your analysis show as to the reasons why the currency has appreciated and stabilized?
Okay, so I appreciate where Bright is coming from, but I also disagree with a few of the analysis that's been made. So maybe let me start with a few points of correction. So the reserve figures per the last last Bank of Ghana statement, the gold reserves, actually it's about 38 tons as of October this year. And if you look at the numbers that would come towards the end of the year, we're probably going to hit about the 40-ton target towards the end of the year or more. So what is really sort of driving it? Yes, Bright talks about that you could do an analysis and you can do, if you want to be sort of more technical, run all the econometrics and look at what are the factors that drives, a country's, currency. And you can break that down to both the monetary as well as the fiscal side. So all of the, call it IMF related reforms and the things that he's talking about, you can put it into the, call it the broad fiscal bucket, or we can kind of further slice and dice it, right? But if you actually look at the statement that the IMF itself put out as part of the 17th review, the press release, and then in the other documents accompanying it, there's an important point that they made there. So let me just, quote for the purposes of public education. It says that growth through September 2025 exceeded expectations, driven by strong services and agriculture. Inflation is now within the Bank of Ghana's target range. And this is the important bit. The external sector strengthened on robust gold and cocoa exports. Reserves accumulation surpassed the ECF targets. The cedi appreciated, and Ghana's debt management trajectory improved, right, significantly, and on and so forth and so on. Fundamentally, if you were to take a different view of things and you do the analysis and you ask yourself, if we did not have the gold board, or let me put it this way, if we did not have the broader domestic gold purchase program, of which gold board is a part of that, and you sat back at the end of 2025, and you asked yourself, where would the exchange rate have been? Would it, this what we are seeing now, the 10.5 or the 11 you're seeing now, would it have come predominantly from the, call it, the lag effect of the IMF reforms? I can tell you no. I'll tell you no, because what you're seeing happening really is mostly driven by what you're seeing on the external side.
Okay.
So both the accumulation of the reserves, and then once you have met your reserve target. So this is the bit that sometimes is also confusing for a lot of people, right? The central bank has a mandate. The mandate is to build, right, the reserves. Your reserves will be actual money that you have. It could be gold, it could be other metals, and all manner of things that will constitute your reserves. And then there's an optimal mix of those reserves, a percentage or proportion that you want in terms of gold. Question then becomes, once you have met those proportions, and importantly, you have also met the reserve target that you had, right, under the program. So under the program, we should have actually been around 3 months, right, of prospective cover. As we speak currently,
About 6
it's
months,
3.5 months.
4.5.
Right?
4.5.
No, this 3.5, when you exclude the petroleum assets and all of that,
Okay,
when
so
you
3.5,
include petroleum assets, that goes to 4.6, 4.7 or 8 months or so. But the way the IMF treats it, we don't include those petroleum-related assets to it. So fundamental point is that if you are a policymaker and you have met your medium-term reserve targets, and you're getting some extra dollars that are coming in that is not necessarily part of those reserves, or even if it were, do you still keep accumulating the reserves, or you can push the remainder of that to your commercial banking channels as part of the measures to support your exchange rate? And that's a policy decision governments across the world make or do, and all of that. So what I'm basically trying to say is that when you do the analysis and you run all the macroeconometric, econometric, whatever type models, what you are seeing fundamentally is driving the CD appreciation that we have seen in the last 1 or 2 years. Is coming from the reserve accumulation that we are seeing. And then there's something to be said also on the structural reforms, the big ticket things that you have to do that goes into the fiscal box, the fiscal discipline that we're seeing, the fact that the markets now believe that you have a credible economic policy that you would want to send. But it is nowhere near the 8 or so that is being sought to.
So if I get you right, you feel the intervention aspect or the intervention factor is stronger than just the fiscal stability factor in your view. And you've said to me that even the accumulation of gold reserves is higher than Bright spoke about. Because he said the intervention is about 45%. 55% is more the other fiscal things that have been done. You believe the intervention, of which the gold reserve accumulation has expanded the BOG's ability to support the city, is much stronger. And you think the gold board as a policy has been critical in the increase in gold reserve accumulation, for which it should be credited a lot more for the appreciation and stabilization. This is what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Gold board important, but even more important is looking at, it sits under your domestic gold policy program. And even the IMF itself says that the domestic gold policy program has become a key macroeconomic stabilization instrument. The question is, okay, yes, let's decompose which one is driving what in terms of this from the external side. Is it just gold board? Is it just the Bank of Ghana through the other channels? So remember that Bank of Ghana also buys gold from the large-scale mines. Is it also what the monetary authorities are doing? And the point I'm trying to say is that for the last 1 year, you have had a very coordinated approach to economic policy making that perhaps we have not seen in some years now, where what the central bank is doing and what the fiscal authorities are doing are relatively in sync. And then when it comes to the reserve point that we're talking about, the question is, you have a target. The central bank has met the medium-term reserve target that it has. Any additional dollars that it is getting and all of that, policy point is, should it keep increasing those reserves, or could it put part of that back into the commercial channels to allow citizens to enjoy the relative stabilization that we're getting? And those are trade-offs that need to be made. So when people make the argument that, we are pumping and printing and all of that, it's neither here nor there, because you have to situate it in the context. You have to situate it in the context of the program targets, the accumulation, the reserve accumulation that you're making relative to those program targets. And then if you have anything sort of extra, what then do you do with it? It's allowed you, for example, in the last few days, we've been able to repay off some of our Eurobond facilities, right, than would have been, right, the case. Your debt profile is coming down. So you have to look at the collective, call it benefit, cost-benefit analysis in terms of what this does to your overall macroeconomic story or trajectory.
Senyo's article on the gold board was very popular, and when I got it, it was marked forwarded many times. That suggests I've been read a lot. Your pre-conclusion paragraph is what I want you to elaborate on. Consequently, our currency appreciation is a surplus and our outlier because it happened too soon. Of course, it's commodity price driven without much structural transformation, but the stability is welcome. Then you go on to say, they are aiding us with what they know. This is IMF. And our homegrown policies must shape what they learn in ways that are practical and unique to Ghana. We have brains too. We are writing the rule book in Ghana and not in Washington. And this is real progress. To borrow from Harvard economist, Professor Danny Roderick. I get a sense you're saying the benefit of where the currency is, we should be happy with it. And the fact that IMF is cautioning about loss should not mean that we shouldn't praise a good policy when we have one. That's my understanding of what you wrote.
You know,
have I summarized you correctly?
Well, fair so, but let's get it right. The first person to praise this is actually IMF.
Yes.
IMF is praising this thing.
And cautioning about the loss.
They are cautioning, and it's a legitimate caution.
So where from the brouhaha?
Because for the IMF...
And by the way, this is what I put on there. This is just to show the uniqueness of 2025. This is Bloomberg Ecodonto just last week. Ghana's CD strengthened more than 40%, first annual increase since at least 1994. And you look at the figure, everything is pointing downwards except last year. And we all agree that this is unprecedented.
It's unprecedented, and we should all take glory in it.
Yes.
The IMF did not anticipate it. Let's get it clear. But we've successfully delivered it. IMF is the first praise singer in this conversation because it keeps commending the domestic gold purchase program, but more importantly, how it's being managed. The problem IMF has is that it's coming at a price. That price should not be sitting on the Bank of Ghana's books because, you know, the IMF's interventions are balance of payment triggered, and the focus is on managing the balance of payment. And the person at the heart of monitoring and managing the BOP is the central bank.
So they shouldn't be.
That is where everything happening in the whole economy comes back to sleep. So it's a central bank focused intervention institution. That's what the IMF does.
Yes.
The World Bank comes straight into the fiscal, looking at for structure. That's different.
Correct.
You know, so they are worried about that book. That book has already taken a 60 billion hit. And in order to actually even deliver a lot more of the monetary tightening policies that they recommended, it means that they would have to take in some cost. Because when you keep the policy rate high, you're actually trying to suck up liquidity from the market. The alternative to that is to increase your cash reserve ratio. But it comes again at a price to the central bank. So let's keep that there. Let the fiscal take this bill. That's the argument IMF is making. And they have to protect their baby. And the Bank of Ghana is their baby. Or is their patient, in quotes. And anybody else creating the problem is in the fiscal. So if you are benefiting from what has been achieved, take the bill, and I support them. What has been achieved has reduced our fiscal bill on different fronts. The minimum are government's direct, on the fiscal side, direct FX index payments. And that alone is over 16 billion in saving. So why would the fiscal not take a 2.4 billion bill? Or if we are right, the last time we were on your sister station, Sami Jeffrey read something from the governor, and I think that that cost is about 4.1 billion or so. You know, he said it on live TV. That's a massive trade-off. At the end of the day, you also have a 60 billion cedi saving. On our import bill, that comes back to everybody. But ultimately, for the Bank of Ghana, it's an institution focused on the management of inflation.
Let me ask a simple question.
True. I'm coming on. I'm landing.
Yeah.
Through the exchange rate as one of the key interventions, achieving this low exchange rate, it's had an immediate translational impact on the prices of goods, or at least on the imported portion of it. Together with the other policies, like its monetary tightening policies, largely a contractionary policy, supporting the fiscal contractionary policy, we've been able to achieve what we have.
Okay,
inflation is what?
My understanding of what you wrote was basically saying, even if we've lost $214 US, the benefit to the overall economy of the appreciation and the stability, all things considered, it's possibly a loss worth taking, because the savings we get in terms of even paying back our debt, the currency appreciation, and you compared the figure prior to the figure now, when you put all things together, you're basically saying it's a hit worth taking. That's the way I understood what you said. And even though, but you didn't say that means we should ignore the 214.
No.
You're saying that we should be happy that the appreciation and stability has saved us other things.
Yes.
Whilst thinking about how to manage the 214.
Yes.
That's basically what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That shock was required because it was a transformational policy that needed an instant impact.
But do we know if it will continue to be making losses?
From the policy, as I understand it, it will continue to make losses until we have certain structural reforms. What we must seek to do is to almost zero it or minimize the cost significantly. Where is this cost coming from? Let's just understand it. But before then, I will respond to Bryce Simon's 55%, which I absolutely disagree with. You have this because we have an economy that has had a massive trade inflow deficit occasioned by smuggling. Gold. When you take reports from the likes of Swiss Aid, who've been there since the 40s and been reporting on these things, they tell us that averagely 45 tons of gold is smuggled in our country. That is $6 billion a year, at least at today's prices. But in those years, absolutely not. So let's balance that. But for now, that's what it will be. And the reason is simple. Artisanal and small-scale mining people think at very tiny margins, and are not sophisticated people, but they're very sophisticated in the protection of their margins. They would give you the smuggler if they can make the least money ahead compared to the market. So when you come to the market where they pay exchange rates at what exchange rate on the open market today is around 11.8 thereabout. What is Bank of Ghana saying? 10.5. So why should I come to you, Bank of Ghana, and sell my gold to you?
So if I understand you,
and collect 10.5.
The gold board helped to reduce the smuggling.
It has significantly helped reduce the smuggling and channel those flows back into our official accounting.
So now we are getting.
But outside
what we
of
produce.
that, of that is that not just official accounting, but also official receipting. It's one thing to say,
this is how much was produced.
Yes.
But then
it doesn't mean that you get it. Like the oil receipts that we see here, we don't have them in real terms.
So you are saying the gold board has solved both the accounting and receiving problem?
Significantly.
Boosting the reserves.
That is
which
what
the BOG has had the space to now use to support the currency. So you believe that the intervention point is much more. So you are agreeing with Prof.
You see, let me break this matter.
We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah,
you see, we are aiming at understanding agreement. We don't want to go into elaboration technicalities.
No, because I want to address the issue of IMF and
I'll let you do that.
I
want to pay my bills. Okay, then I'll come back to do that. This is the point of view. I will come back, take concluding remarks on the currency, because I want to deal with a couple of other points, because we have another half an hour to go. Stay with us.
Ten years of unforgettable memories breathtaking sights, unlimited excitement, new friendships. And this March, we're turning it all the way up. From the 1st to the 8th of March 2026, get ready for the road trip of a lifetime. 8 epic days, 14 regions, 1 legendary caravan. We roll from Greater Accra through the Eastern region, cruise into the Northern and Upper East regions, vibe through the Western region, and hit many more iconic destinations across Ghana. It's culture, it's adventure, it's pure discovery with the best people and the best vibes. Expect non-stop fun, endless scenic views, deep cultural immersion, new networks, and friendships and memories that will outlive the journey. Seats are limited, and this is the 10th anniversary. You cannot miss it. Watch out for details soon.
This is still the point of view, and I think my panelists agree that the currency is relatively more stable and the appreciation is good. Although the band of appreciation is still an issue. The president said between 10 and 12. I think both gentlemen in the studio think that's too wide a band. They feel that for stability to be long-term, the predictability must be more, but that's not the purpose of today's program. Where there's a disagreement is what has led to the stability. Bright believes it's more to do with the other fiscal work that has been done, a bit more than 50%, and then, of course, the Bank of Ghana's intervention, a third of which has been gold board supported. Both Senyo and Theo disagree. They feel like the intervention point is much stronger. The jury is still out there. I feel like we can agree to disagree.
It's not difficult to get to that.
Should I just respond to some of the issues before you come back in with your
All right, so do
issue?
that.
Okay. So one, we have to remember that smuggling, nothing inside the innovation that is gold board can solve smuggling. And I'll explain in very simple terms. Smuggling is simply saying that I won't pay the government bills. I don't want to pay tax in the simplest form. Now, the tax at the level of the production.
There's no tax on production anymore, on ASM. No. So what are these?
The corporate income tax. The company you've set up, that's formal company. You pay corporate income tax. So your corporate income tax, you don't want to pay it. So because you don't want to formalize. The person who's doing the trading, who is taking the gold from you, doesn't want to pay tax. That's another 25% at the trading level. When you take out the other formalities, VAT, whatever it is, that you as a formal company, you pay, and you add it all up, the total amount of your profit that could disappear across that value chain between the producer of the gold and the seller of the gold, the trader of the gold, is over 30-something%. Unless we can somehow create a mechanism.
It's also not correct.
So let me
Why is it 30-something% of what?
Of the person's profits.
Okay.
The former company's profits.
Right.
So the former company's profits, about the 30%, there is no adjustment in the gold board mechanism, in terms of the price wedge, etc., etc., that will give you back a net back of 30%. So somebody who is determined to smuggle, who is doing that evade cost of formalization, such as tax and the rest of it, you cannot use economic innovation at this level to stop that person. So the only way you stop that person is you do massive reform of efficiency so that there's a benefit to formalization. That takes time. So that I want to go and formalize. I want to register a company.
It's 1 year. Wait, hold on. Gold has existed since May. May to December. Is it too short to measure if smuggling has reduced or not? Because smuggling. Hold on. Smuggling is an objective number you can calculate. So we don't even have to do a theory around it.
What I wanted to establish is that you cannot solve smuggling with that kind of institutional innovation. That.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that if there's a disparity between what is produced and what is officially recorded as the amount you get from selling.
The only way we find that out in the Swiss Aid report is that you go to Dubai, you go to Sharjah, you go to these countries, you go to India. You look at their import numbers and you look at our import numbers. Yeah. And the last time I did a quick scan, those gaps exist.
But is it at the same level?
I don't know. I haven't done it.
Hold on. I think that we can all say that if that data is available as of December 2025, then we can all objectively say.
Yeah, but we haven't done the analysis of the data.
So let's just
what we know is that the gaps exist, and therefore there is smuggling, which is why
Yeah,
gold
but
bond
the gap,
and
the extent of the gap is an issue.
Let me try and explain.
it's very difficult.
The analysis.
No, listen
You
to me.
read, you read the Swiss aid one. You saw that it was 45. You saw that the 2024 was
Senyo, I haven't
6
invited you.
Easier.
Isn't it
I'm
just the
saying
same
that-
100 we are
I
getting?
haven't
I'm
invited
saying
you.
that.
I
I'm
haven't
saying that
invited
one.
you. I want to listen.
The smugglers,
Yes.
they have a very structured incentive because when you don't pay tax, it's
Yeah.
very difficult for margins such as 1%, 2% that we've been talking about in gold trading to offset a 30% tax hit. That's
No,
number
you
one.
are wrong again. It's not 1%, 2%. You see, you don't understand the thing.
What is not 1%?
That's
2%?
not where
The
we are
exchange
going.
rate differentials are in excess of 10%.
Which exchange rate differentials?
Oh gosh.
I'm saying that the margins that will enable the trader, the discounts and premium in the gold trade mechanism, that will enable the trader to feel that there's a benefit formalization is way smaller than the tax they avoid. That's a simple.
What is
Let's
that
not go
tax?
into it in
That tax
detail.
is not on revenue for you to even be able to
That tax
properly
is on profit.
appreciate. It's on profit. What is the profit?
What is what profit?
What is the profit? Have you seen that? Have you
The
seen
mining,
that before?
if the mining company's cost of
Well, have
production
they stopped?
is 2,000,
Have they stopped existing as companies that GRA cannot go for?
yes, because
Why?
if you're a smuggler, your goal is to evade all
The
accountability.
smuggler, or we are not interested in the smuggler. Gold Board does not go buy products from the smuggler. It buys products from the traders and the miners.
Yes,
So
so-
it is the miners matter you should be talking about.
The
Not
miner,
the smuggler. Who is interested in the smuggler?
The miner and the smuggler, if the miner was disclosing their actual output, they can't smuggle. If they were going to GRA, everybody and saying, this amount of gold I'm producing, use my books, etc., then smuggling will not happen. So anytime you talk about smuggling, you start from the mine. Because to smuggle,
Exactly.
I'm coming. You lie about your output.
Yes.
Lying about the output means that you lie about your revenues.
Yes.
Lie about your revenues means that you lie about your profits.
Yes.
And if you do that, you're able to escape tax. If you escape tax at your level, production,
Again, subject to your cost.
yes, you escape tax. Yes, subject to your cost.
But we all know they make profits. Whether they understate it, I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Most of these people are not
But why
properly
you smuggling?
formalized. They are registered entities. They are not even formalized.
but
All
my-
this
my-
is
my
very
point
important.
is-
Guys,
Guys.
I think we had the back and forth.
We've
Let
had-
me just explain it. So, as far as I'm concerned, the tax hit is bigger than the advantage they get from formalization. And therefore, when you want to stop smuggling, your primary targeting has to be law enforcement related, intelligence driven and things like that. It cannot only be incentives. So that's number one. Number two, once the smuggling continues to happen, which the gold board itself admits, and they continue to catch people, they continue to parade them before the media, etc., knowing therefore that it continues to exist, we must focus our minds not on the view that through some metaphysical mechanism they've cleared out all smuggling.
They haven't said
We
that.
don't. I'm coming.
But can
we don't know the
but-
numbers.
But right, can
The-
we?
the numbers are
easy to
the
extrapolate.
area that I know, the one I know.
You see, we are making this very difficult.
No, I'm not.
You sat down,
I'm
you
building
got
up
the
a
press
point.
on model that
I'm
only
building
God
a point.
knows.
No,
That
but
is
I'm
about
building a point.
exchange
But
rate. The
Senyo-
basic
Senyo-
simple one
Senyo,
that
you're not
everyone
even-
can see.
Senyo,
So
you're
you
not
can
build
do
my
it.
point.
Senyo,
Let me
you're
build
not
my
helping
point.
my discussion.
So
Relax.
as far as I'm saying, as far as it goes, the smuggling dynamic
Yes.
is hard to estimate, but we know that the incentives have not changed. When we go to the importing side and we look at the numbers, our data suggests that those gaps persist.
What data do you have for 2025 to say that it persists? Don't say our data. Show us the data.
I'll show you the data.
Show
here.
us the data.
I'll show you the data right now.
Okay, say it.
No, let me
Say
show-
it. This thing you still keep
I'm saying
pontificating that
No, I think-
you
I
have
think-
something. You
no,
don't have it.
I think-
That
I have
data
what?
doesn't
I
exist.
think
What
we-
data doesn't exist?
The data for 2025. You went to UAE.
Which
Tell
data-
us what
which
UAE
data
said.
for-
Tell everybody what UAE told you. That you are telling us that it still shows that there are gaps still
but
exist.
how,
Tell us.
how we get our
We
data,
are waiting,
for
tell
instance.
us.
Wait. How we,
Bright, why you don't know something? Be patient.
why
But
is it
Senyo,
not allowed to make analysis?
why are you doing this?
That factor that data
What? You have to know how
doesn't
to
exist.
explain the
Okay.
data.
So tell us
How
the
do you explain the
data.
data?
So I said,
You
tell
know what?
us.
We have data from off-takers, etc., which we, because of the kind of work that we do.
What work?
We
But why-
know,
why-
for
answer the
instance,
question.
we know, for instance, that the amount of gold that goes to specific off-takers,
What are those off-takers?
Sovereign, Pinnacle, etc., which are not disclosed by the gold board. We have had people who have disclosed data to us, as an example.
From where? From
Oh.
Pinnacle. Pinnacle disclosed to you.
I'm saying that we have
So
data.
tell everybody
we
the
put it
data.
out already.
It's okay.
I put it out on my blog.
Then what's the gap?
Which gap?
So tell us here, what's the gap? What's the
Don't
gap that
shout
still
like this,
exists?
because then I'm not able
You
to
are
explain.
shouting. You
I'm
shout first.
explaining
When you
that.
say I shouldn't shout.
Senyo,
Yeah, because I'm the one on the floor trying to explain
So
my
that means you
situation.
should shout.
No, I think you are being disruptive. Let
So,
me take. Let me
no,
take-
this is what we do. Then we don't explain anything. I'm saying that.
Answer the question
No, but
simply.
can-
So
it's a
what's the number?
step-by-step
No,
thing.
do you want to host the show now?
No, you
There's
carry
a
on.
step-by-step.
Why?
There's a step-by-step analysis. One analysis is that
Yeah.
we have data of gold trade in Ghana that is not disclosed by Gold Board, and we put that on our blog, which allows people who go to our blog to see how much data gold, for instance, is going to the likes of Sonovan and the rest.
Yes.
So that's number one. Number two, that same source of data have given us data that tells us that the gaps are persistent, but it's not comprehensive data. It's example data, which I will show.
But it doesn't give a quantitative amount of whether the gap is reducing or not.
No, it doesn't give the whole period. So we have like a specific month. There's the disclosure on the Ghana.
So will it be useful if at a certain period time T, we all know whether that gap has reduced or not?
That's what we are aiming for. So what we are doing now.
So that will help the discussion
when
we know that.
The reason we haven't brought it out is because it doesn't cover the entire period.
Good.
It's for specific months.
Good.
Okay.
So when we get when we get the full period, all
I'm saying is that there is evidence, as far as I'm concerned, that there is still a gap between what the importer declares and what we as exporters declare.
Fair enough.
Given that fact, there is potentially smuggling ongoing, which the global body doesn't deny. The second very critical point is that when Theo was talking about the fact that, we now have excess reserves in the Bank of Ghana, obviously they must intervene, he forgets a critical, important early stage, which is that if we hadn't centralized the gold in this way, there will still be gold flowing in different ways. So for instance, gold dollars flowing in different ways, some of which will end up in the commercial banks, for which reason they may not even need the central bank's intervention. So if you don't take into account all the counterfactuals, and you assume that, all the gold that we have in reserves, all the dollars now we have that have increased in reserves, is allowing intervention, forgetting why the intervention is sometimes needed. They're not, covering the full picture.
You've made 2 points. Let me take Theo's reaction to that quickly. Theo, let me take your comment on.
Let me make one last point. The other last point is that we always talk about the dollar side of things, but a very critical element of the exchange rate is also the exchange rate is a price. It's the price of the dollar.
Yeah.
One thing that affects all prices is supply and demand. So when you have a lot of CDs chasing dollars, you will naturally have the dollar appreciating. So contractionary policies, like he said, which knock out CDs are equally effective when you are trying to control the exchange rate. So you cannot have an analysis where you look only at the supply of dollars without looking at the liquidity and sterilization angle. And our argument is that as part of the intervention program, the Bank of Ghana sterilizes heavily using open market operation bills, such as the Bank of Ghana bills. And that sterilization, where they sell these bills at a certain interest rate to mop out CDs, also has an effect. So you are taking all of this into account.
You still believe your 55.
And so the intervention is not just the dollar coming in. It's the fact that, in our view, the way they get the dollar has been leading to massive sterilization. And when you combine all of those effects, you get the current rate that we have. So you cannot isolate that and say, is the gold board bringing maybe 60% of all the dollars they are using, and therefore we should attribute all the benefit to the
Let me take Theo's reaction to what has been said so far, especially if there's data on whether there's actual reduction in smuggling. Theo, I just want to take your comments on that and your reaction to what's been going on so far.
No, a few interesting points I want to address, starting with the point about whether or not, if the central bank was not through gold board and through the other mechanisms it's working on, was not involved, right, in trying to channel these additional monies, which in any case would have actually left the system. There is nothing in the data that I have looked at or seen so far that shows that most of those dollars hitherto was coming through the formal banking channels that Bright tries to talk about, right? If you did a proper disaggregation and you did all the sort of analytical work, I would think that the proportion of those hitherto gold dollars from the ASM sector, right, that was coming into the formal banking channels is probably going to be on a scale of about 20 or 30 or so, right, %. But what is radically different this time around is that you are, in a sense, through policy, trying to force them to get or bring those dollars into your formal channels via gold board and then ultimately to the central bank, right? So what you have done is basically to push strongly to get the dollars coming in to a more formal channel. What that means is that now you have additional inflows that you have visibility on. Hitherto, you did not have any visibility. And this is why this is extremely, for me, very important, right? Because if it was just the IMF reforms that Bright is talking about and others have spoken about in the report, I can tell you that the CD would have been in a relatively worse shape than we are now. What I mean by that is that your exchange rate would not have ended the year at 10.45 or 10.5. It would have moved from maybe just 15 to maybe like 13 or something like that. And this is why this is very, very important. So you go to the IMF own assessment, right, which buttresses this point in paragraph 33. And then they say that the Bank of Ghana is actively managing the FX market while increasing its footprint. Since program approval, the bank has taken an increasingly active role as an intermediary in the FX market on the back of stronger balance of payment inflows. And then it goes further to say that the domestic gold purchase program has been the key source of these inflows, which also includes cocoa and repatriation and so forth and so on. And then it goes further to say, well, in addition to this, and they need to address, right, some of the sort of other risks that are emerging as a result of these additional inflows that hitherto was not coming as a result of the implementation of the
increase in those inflows are not due only to gold. They are also due to price effects.
It says
that commodities.
Now
so how can you just ignore
both volume, but it's in tonnage and also in value.
No. There is the money you need, and the monetary equivalent include the price value.
We agree, but without
taking into account the fact that the price
are you disagreeing that there's been an sharp increase in the volume of gold accumulation by the central bank?
Yeah, but that doesn't have any effect on the exchange rate directly.
No, but
so it's the intervention we are talking about.
No, but Bright.
Wait.
Bright. No,
the gold that is in the reserve.
Yes.
That is in the reserve.
Yes.
It's not what is being used for the intervention.
Do you realize that it signals the market?
Of course, it's a sentiment
so
builder.
Why do you think that the reserve as built does not influence the rate
we are not talking about
the market general sentiment about the
stability
of your currency?
The specific quote
yes.
about the inflows and how that inflows goes into the market footprint. That is not about the sentiment. So on the terms of how much money goes into the market, the biggest driver has had to be the price. Not only because that increased the amount of actual money.
No, but Bright, hold on. Right. Listen, let's not complicate issues.
Yeah.
The amount of dollars you have to support the currency, there's a wide range of things. If you have more gold, and the gold has a better price, it's a volume and values thing. Good. So you look at the gold tonnage and the gold price.
That's the export.
Yes.
So when you export,
yes,
and the price is now double what it was last year,
yes,
even if you exported the same volume, you have double that money. You agree, right?
Yeah, but the gold reserve program, the central bank does purchase gold.
Yes, and that one it keeps in reserve, which has a sentiment effect.
Yes.
But you're talking about the actual money that goes into intervention.
Yes.
And I'm saying that when you export,
yes,
and if the price has doubled, then even if you export the same volume, you get double, right? Okay. The second thing is that because the price has doubled, a lot of mines that are currently marginal are able to increase production because the price is better.
So which mines? We have two sectors, ASF and then we have last year. So which ones are marginal?
Both. Because the dollars both. The dollars,
ASF don't do marginal mines.
But you are aware we have
the dollar ASF does not do marginal mines.
You are aware we've interrupted this point.
The dollars that go into the Bank of Ghana inflows to do these things. It's not only from the small scale sector. The large mining sector also does surrender. So the effect of prices on their contribution have also increased.
Correct.
Even their profits, if it increases, and now there's a government sustainability levy, and that money which goes to the government, if the government sells some of that money back to the central bank, all of that increases the amount of resources.
After the price issue, we can't downplay.
I'm saying that we cannot have an analysis like Dr. Acheampong is doing throughout, suggesting that all those inflows have nothing to do with external market conditions. That's all I wanted to draw attention to.
No, but I think the question is the degree.
That's what I did. That's why I broke it down.
Your degree is totally wrong. Your model, you should show it to everybody. Your model does not make sense for me. So show us. When he was interrupting this, it was okay.
I cannot show it to you today. I can't carry it.
Please put it out there. You have been posting notice. I put a link. And then we'll see the link. And we can critique. Your model does not add up. It doesn't. In finance or in economics.
I put out something that many people are not aware. Many people tell we started domestic gold purchase.
Yeah.
Domestic gold purchase, we are actually a late comer. We are like, if you think of the 8 countries that do most domestic gold purchase, Ghana is like last but 2 or so. Countries like Ecuador, Philippines have been doing it for a long time with different designs.
Agreed.
So I put it out today because we finished the analysis of how their system differ from us and how their system is better. So we are going to put all this stuff out.
I have a last question for the panel. Theo, whilst we all agree that on the exchange rate, monetary side, things have looked good, I think there's still a financing problem facing all African countries Ghana being included. Concessional financing is not increasing. Domestic sources are getting exhausted. Commercial Eurobonds are not viable. There's the prejudice rates that they charge us. So whatever success the Mahama administration has achieved, you from the finance minister has to admit that if you look at the ambitious infrastructure plans this government has, they still need to answer the financing question as to where they are going to raise the right type of money to finance our development. I think we cannot agree on this. Theo, I'll start with you on this. This is my last question.
Oh, that is not an issue at all. I mean, that everybody understands. It's a fundamental point that needs to be addressed, right? That yes, you have a bit of a headwind on the external side that we are enjoying at the moment. But fundamentally, what do you do to raise additional revenue and live within your means? And this is where, for example, my job or role at the MOF becomes kind of extremely important. Again, also because, markets and people are watching, and it's okay. When you leave the program midpoint next year, right? What safeguards are there in place? And this is, for me, where the ongoing reforms that we're doing and the results of that becomes increasingly even more important in sending the correct signal to the market that the gains that we have made in 2025 can and will be sustained in 26 and 27. So let me talk through about 11 things.
Hey, you have less than a minute. You can't talk 11 things.
Oh, no, I won't go through all of them.
You have just like a minute.
Yeah, so I'll just mention a few of them. But the critical things that we're doing on the fiscal side of the equation, right? I talked initially about the independent oversight, the fiscal council and the fiscal anchors. The big thing that is also working currently is the issue of expenditure commitment control. So we have this commitment authorization system that is now working. And if you don't have the spending, you don't have a payment order for it, it's not been approved and authorized, and it doesn't find its way in the budget, forget, it's not going to be paid for. There's also a lot of work being done now on the on efficiency, right? Spending efficiency review. So the budget talked about the independent value for money office. That is being done. The enabling legislation is being worked on. There's also things done around procurement, tightening.
I'll do a separate show on this. I just wanted you to admit that.
Okay. For sure, I agree.
That for 2026 going forward, the key question is to get the right financing at the right price for our development. I think we all agree on that. So as for the 11 things, I will give you another opportunity to explain all of that.
Don't worry. Don't worry. But the financing, yes, is being addressed for sure. I mean, we are not going to the capital markets to borrow.
But we have not talked about all the challenge IMF program.
We can't
in the budget.
Yeah, we have only 1.5 hours, and I have run out of time. I can't even take your concluding comments. Unfortunately,
this is not fair.
Yes, because you are not treating me fairly in the interview.
So
you let me end the show, then you can continue.
But you don't want to look. This is very critical. Let's get it very clear.
The show is over.
The projections he made are absolutely flawed in finance, and I explain.
He's 55, 45.
It's flawed. But it's not in economics. It's not in finance, and that's why I say you should put a model. I'll explain to you. One, you should remember very well the father of finance. You should remember Eugene Farmer. And remember what they said? He told us about the efficient market hypothesis.
We are all MBAs here.
You understand? And so what I get.
So you can't claim something is fraud.
So you cannot. If you did your MBA well, you should know this one. If you did your MBA well, you should know this one.
I have to apologize.
Every information that is available public is priced into the value of an asset.
So this has nothing to do with the fact that different policies contribute to
the program has ended. The good news is that both Bright and Senyo have published what they will say. So if you want more information about their views, you can go to his blog. You can also go to some of the articles he's published and read what they've written. Thank you so much for watching tonight's edition of the show. Sometimes tempers get high, but we are good friends. We'll see you next time. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.